you. I will find you. And I will kill you.
I'm the Walrus. Shut the fuck up, Donnie.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me. Aren't you?
Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
Just been revoked.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
You want answers!
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Because it is my name!
I see dead.
Today, Junior?
You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? What?
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
The price is wrong, bitch.
Welcome to Critics Not Cynics, the podcast that tries to prove that you can be a critic without being a cynic. And this week, if you can't, again, tell by the background, we are finally getting back to our MCU franchise review. It's been a while. We've taken a little bit of a break. But yes, you're getting 2 weeks of Marvel content in a row. So hopefully you're not too overwhelmed with that. And as always, I'm joined by Leslie. Leslie, how's it going?
Hi, I'm good right now.
Yes, this was a little bit iffy on if we were going to get this recorded or not, but thankfully I decided to not be a little lazy, and you decided to feel a little bit better. So it was one of those things where like I was going to take a nap, and then I was just like laying there, and I'm like, I'm not going to get a nap in, so let's just get this recorded. So,
and thankfully I felt good today, so
exactly, yes,
we're good.
So yeah, and of course, you know, we're recording this after work, so it's always best to get it done and out of the way for the weekend. Hopefully, also by the time this releases, I will have seen Eternals. I don't know if you yourself are going to get a chance to get out and see it, just depending on how you're feeling. So hopefully, we'll have a report on that here before too long, and. As always, we did a stream last weekend, and we should have done the stream this recently past weekend as well. So hope you guys are enjoying those as we're doing the games. I know one of the ones I planned for, except I don't know how it'll be with the music, is to do Guardians of the Galaxy for Leslie, since Leslie's not much of a gamer, but she likes the Marvel content and Marvel stuff, and I think she would really enjoy the game. That would be one way to kind of get to show the game off. And since as we've tested it out this past weekend, I think with Pat and Discord, I think we can do it where one of you guys is on the stream with me, so it's not just me just talking around. So with that stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and pretty much dive into it with Iron Man 3, or basically Incredibles live action. So okay, let's go ahead and kind of do this a little bit differently than we've done with the other ones. Let's talk about, because we have a kind of a pre-Shang-Chi view of Iron Man 3 and a post-Shang-Chi view of Iron Man 3. So if you haven't seen Shang-Chi, that might be a little bit of a spoiler for you, but we'll kind of telegraph it before we get to talking about how we feel after Shang-Chi. So when I saw this in the theaters, I was really excited for it. Shane Black, is a very talented filmmaker, except that I don't think when it lends to properties like this, and even I believe he was involved in the last Predator movie, his like fanboyness doesn't really actually work. And if you're not familiar with Shane Black, he actually was in the first Predator film as well, and he's done Kiss Kiss Bang Bang with Robert Downey Jr. as well. Nice Guys, this, I believe Predator, the kind of reboot sequel to Predator. And I was kind of excited for him taking this over because I've, a little bit familiar with this stuff. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. Even if you're not necessarily familiar with Shane's work, Robert Downey Jr. gives a top-tier performance as well as Val Kilmer. But when I ultimately saw this film, like, I think I'm one of the rare people who, for the most part, I enjoyed all of the film, except for some story points. I know you have a different opinion. So broadly, what was your opinion of this after you saw it in the theaters?
Yeah, after I saw it in the theaters, let's turn back the clock. I remember just kind of being disappointed with it and kind of like, why did we even need this? It was just kind of, not that any part of it was like stand out like terrible. Mm-hmm. There just wasn't any part of it that I felt like I needed this from Tony. I was just kind of like,
yeah,
whatever.
I'll
it wasn't
say the
like hype, and it wasn't bad.
The internal kind of conflict of him being him or Iron Man was not really great. I think my biggest complaint about story plots for this, and it's probably very minor for most people, or it's actually just a very minor plot in general, but like it totally negates Avengers in a sense, and that is the removal of the arc reactor from his heart. Like they do the surgery, get the shrapnel out, because like that was the one thing that protected him from Loki's tricks, with the staff. Like having that there, and I feel like his whole speech with Banner on the helicarrier and everything, it was really negated by this film, because this film is and I think that's the problem that comes with this first one, this one being the one directly after Avengers, is what do you do post Avengers? Where do we take the stories? Where do we set these characters?
Yeah, well, we talked, and of course we haven't done a Black Widow review. I have been able to watch it since, but my suggestion after having watched Black Widow was that the next movie after Avengers should have been a half and half between Widow and Hawkeye, and it should have been, I don't want to give too much spoilers about Black Widow since we haven't gotten there, and if you haven't seen it, but it should have been about a particular plot point. Yeah. And given us more time to meet characters and given us flashback history for both of those characters, since they're sort of the B-listers of the Avengers. Right. I feel like this slot right here should have been their movie, and then we do Iron Man 3, even if it was still exactly like this film. Right. Maybe if you'd had some more space, it might have not felt so negating, like it might have felt like you had more time. But I do think the slot directly after Avengers should have been a Hawkeye Black Widow, like half and half movie. And
I think, and this is a criticism we both have of the MCU and of Kevin Feige in general, is his lack of consideration with Black Widow. Because like this can be a very like touchy subject, and one thing that like. It's currently an issue, I think, in Hollywood, where there is an argument that doesn't need to be there, where his opinion, and maybe the vast majority of audience members' opinions, I'm not sure, were that a female superhero film could not succeed on its own. But then we get Wonder Woman, right. And it blows everything out of expectations. And honestly, for as much of a criticism as you can make of the DCEU and its lack of cohesion and structured world building, they were able to get out their first female-led superhero film. And to be fair, like there have been Marvel movies where there were a female Elektra, which poor performing and an okay film for the time that it was made in. I think like now that we have this structured, organized world, it doesn't fit. But I remember watching the Elektra film, just thinking it was fine. But I think there's that misconception that a female superhero film would be met with criticism. No one would go out and see it. And I think the problem being is you have to make it be a good film. Like, you take out the female aspect of it alone.
You have to tell a good story.
Exactly. And so I think that that's where the mishandling of Black Widow was, because I agree. This would have been a perfect part to put in a Black Widow story, whether it be, especially when we get to like Age of Ultron and we get more little tiny tidbits. And like when we get to the actual Black Widow film, it feels like it was just, let's cram everything in as quick as possible, because we don't even get like, payouts for some of those little tidbits that were worked into Age of Ultron. And it's kind of disappointing that we'll most likely never get
that,
there.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with, Tony and post New York, PTSD. It's not really a fan of it. And we've got the rebranding of War Machine as Iron Patriot. We got Aldrich Killian. We got Maya Hansen. We got Extremis.
We get AIM.
And now
even though they don't do anything with it.
Well, I don't know if you heard about this, and this is complete speculation, complete rumor, but AIM may come back because they may have tapped Jim Carrey for MODOK.
Okay.
And for several appearances, like not just a one film off type thing. So
that'd be interesting.
With MODOK's ties to AIM, I think, especially with how they're going to do MODOK being a big giant floating head, basically, I think AIM is set for a comeback, and who knows, maybe we'll even see Aldrich come back, because like we've seen Extremis do what it can do, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that maybe some part of him survived and has been in hiding.
Right.
But yeah, so I think another complaint that people generally have of this film, which is where I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum for it, is a lot of people don't like that Tony is outside of the suit for 75% of the film. And normally that would be a complaint from me. But I liked what the story did, and it made me forget that I wanted to see him in the suit. I think his relationship with Harley was fantastic. A little young mind to kind of bounce ideas off of, and all that stuff. The mechanic aspect, all of that stuff that happens in Tennessee, I really enjoy. Although I feel like, again, it's cramming a lot of material in with the Extremis soldiers. One kind of weird. I noticed this in the theaters, and I noticed it in my rewatch. A series of events with like how they spaced out the scene where Tony's walking to the bar, and he runs into Brant, the female Extremis soldier, and they have their little conversation about the watch, and then she goes on, and then he goes in, and then he sits down with the woman and is talking about the soldier. And then all of a sudden she's in there, like in the bar, slamming down the fake badge, acting like she's Homeland Security. Like, it just, that confluence of events, like he runs into her outside, she's leaving, but just, I mean, you can say, well, because she knows who Tony is, like that's why she went back to the bar, but it just feels weird with how that whole scene plays out. I also like James Badgedale in this, and he's the kind of the bald head, bad guy who is, causing Happy a whole lot of problems in the film. I do like their little exchange at the beginning when he's like Badge, and he's like got that leg over the chair, and he picks it up and dangles it and everything. And then Guy Pearce, I think, is really great as Aldrich, although ultimately, again, this being the main problem that I think the MCU has as a whole, outside of villains like Ultron and Thanos, is a very poorly developed villain.
It doesn't. They haven't really found a stride yet with villains,
right? And
of being able to properly utilize them. I think it. I don't know if it's just a Marvel thing or if it's also like a Disney thing, because it's like the heroes need to win in the end, and we need to have a happy ending, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So they're afraid to go too far, I guess, with a villain, or to end on a villain winning. I don't really know, but I feel like, well, you did a good job developing Thanos in little bits and pieces. You just need to be able to try and do something like that a little more condensed, into one story.
Because I think the thing that we can say the most about Phase 2 of the MCU is one-shot villains. Outside of like something like Winter Soldier, when you get Malekith and Thor: Dark World, Aldrich here. Who else we got? Even Ultron to an extent, but like even Ultron didn't need that much developing because it's very basic. He's he's the Terminator. He's Skynet. So like everyone knows what needs to go on with that. But I really do think like phase 2 is really the problem of creating convincing villains and. Because like Malekith, and when we get to Thor: Dark World, which I believe is the next one, it's bad. I mean, it's really bad when it comes to that. At least like Aldrich has some of like they do the great like one of the things I like best about this film is the opening scene in Bert's Switzerland or whatever, where we see Ho Jensen and the conversation referencing back all the way back to Iron Man 1. And Aldrich being kind of the lame, not lame, but physically impaired, awkward genius, meeting his hero, trying to propose an idea for them to work together, and ultimately, getting the extreme narcissistic Tony shutting him down, and that this is what creates the villain for later on in the film.
Mm-hmm. Which goes back to him. We create our own demons because he was such a narcissist.
Well, and you think about it, like that's.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say you kind of feel bad that Aldrich met him there. That why couldn't he have met him when he was a little bit more humbled?
Well, and that demons line isn't necessarily even specifically just for Aldrich. You think about you just go to Iron Man 1 and his weapons and Ironmonger and all that stuff. Like even with Whiplash, like these are all things that are tied to his legacy. And I think that's ultimately what we get throughout the MCU is Tony's ability to change what his legacy was to what it is now. And so I know this one's kind of all over the place, but pre Shang-Chi with the Mandarin and the Mandarin reveal that this is an actor just playing a role for Aldrich. This was the thing that I disliked the most coming out of the film. Like I said, 95% of the film, for the most part, really enjoyed it, especially the final sequence with all the suits and everything. Our little kind of hint with Igor at a Hulkbuster armor, and all the very fun stuff that we get in that final fight. But it was really let down when you tell me Ben Kingsley is going to be playing the Mandarin, and I'm going in and I'm expecting him, and he's doing a fantastic job. Mm-hmm. Then we get to Miami, and we find out it's Trevor Slattery, and he's just an actor. And I do love the line what was it? Oh, I was on drugs. Oh, what did they do? Get you off them? No, they gave me more.
Yeah.
It's just okay, very funny, just very well. That's what Ben Kingsley is. He's a very talented actor. So he was able to do both of those roles, and I enjoyed that. But I hated that reveal.
Yeah, so at the time I didn't know much, but what I knew going in was that other people were very disappointed with whatever it was, so I didn't do any research more than that until I saw the movie. And then once I'd seen it, I then, Googled a little bit and just kind of realized that this is supposed to be Tony's main enemy, mm-hmm. and and it's turned into this, and they just didn't utilize it at all. So that was also well, that's a letdown. Not that I think Ben Kingsley did a great job. He was fantastic with what he was given to do, but it was that disappointment of that's what they decided to do with this villain,
right.
That's what they tried to do.
It just felt like a complete waste. And then when you have Aldrich there at the end going, "I am the Mandarin," it's no, you're not. You're just this other villain. You're not the Mandarin. So yeah, it was a very kind of like disappointing, just whatever moment, and then it gets a little redemption in the one shot, All Hail the King, which we'll talk a little bit here about now, because we get to see Trevor go to jail, and we also get a little reprisal from Justin Hammer, a little bit in the lunchroom. And then he's getting interviewed, and we find out that that interviewer is actually an agent of the real Mandarin, and breaks him out of jail. And that's kind of all we had for years. And we kind of talked about this when we talked a little bit about the Shang-Chi trailer, was, okay, will that be revisited?
Yeah.
And then here we are. So again, a little bit spoilers for Shang-Chi if you haven't seen it. We get Trevor back, and what feels like a total redemption arc for what they did with the Mandarin in Iron Man 3.
Yeah.
Just completely retconning, but not really retconning anything. Like, it fixed it, and it makes watching this movie now with that knowledge
so much better.
Yes, like it takes away that kind of negative reaction you have where like, oh, this is all they're going to do, that they just wasted this character completely. Whereas now they've actually approached it in a much better way, and they're like, well, we're going to have the Mandarin really kind of be more focused for Shang-Chi and have a more compelling story, do him more justice here in this film, and then also bridge Iron Man 3 and Shang-Chi together with Trevor. And because especially we had gone so many years or a few years without anything happening after All Hail the King. So like just leaving you going, will that ever be addressed? Will we ever see Trevor again? Like, you set that all up, and then once the stuff started coming out for Shang-Chi, that they were dealing with the Mandarin and all that stuff, it was like, okay, I think I see where this is going.
Yeah.
So.
Well, for what is like 15 minutes or whatever it is of All Hail the King, that was enough. Like having Shang-Chi obviously is far better, but having that bit was at least enough to be like, okay, I can go ahead and give it to you, Marvel, that Aldridge is part of this think tank, and the think tank might have like gone through and done their Google search or whatever and seen like, oh, there's mythical references to this supposed warrior or whatever, and let's create, like, they could have come up with this sort of a thing, like lies, there's usually a little bit of truth sort of a thing, that like they created the persona and just took that name, and like that is realistic. It's not just that he randomly made something up that happened to coincidentally be similar to, like, I just feel like the interviewer, when he's like laying out all the different images and stuff, when he's asking him, did you know that there's a real blah, 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 and going on, that's like, okay, I can see like a big think tank of people could have like seen a bunch of this stuff on the internet or research or whatever, and decided, we'll create this character. And like, and it seems legit, and it doesn't seem like such a total waste, like if you just had just the movie.
Right. Yeah. It kind of it does retroactively like fix a lot of those issues that I think almost everyone outside of anyone not knowing any character knowledge for the Mandarin and who were upset with what they did with the Mandarin in this film, give them a little, like, because I know when I watched it, I was like, oh, awesome. Like, at least you're telling me the Mandarin's out there, like, and that he's not thrilled.
He's not happy about it.
with Trevor's, taking his namesake and everything like that. So, I'm trying to think if there's any other, because I think, again, a little major failure of this film is, and it's a little bit of a failure like with Black Widow and some of the other kind of okayer Marvel movies, is that I don't really feel like we're supposed to feel like this is a journey for Tony to come to the realization that like he is Iron Man and Iron Man is him, that there's really no distinguishing one or the other, because like his fear kind of before it is Iron Man is this almost mythical thing and Tony is just this thing over here to the side. At least that's kind of my interpretation of it a little bit. And yet like it felt like a crisis that Tony wouldn't have or shouldn't have. Like, it just, his whole internal crisis throughout the film, outside of the PTSD, because like that I can understand. You know, you just fought aliens, you went to space, you kind of died for like 2 seconds.
Well, I feel like it's all a little more intertwined than that, just because he was there in space, he saw all that, and now he's kind of panicking. I think that he isn't enough to be able to protect Earth, let alone Pepper, you know, and like him having like an actual real stable relationship with one person is like a new thing for him, you know, and there's like all this, I think it's sort of all this at the same time sort of a thing, and he doesn't really know how to handle it. So you get the stress of the PTSD and the anxiety, and it kind of, it's a circular thing that like, I'm not good enough, you know, Iron Man can be good enough, but what am I without the suit, you know, like that's that when he has to mentor, comes back in Spider-Man when he mentors Peter. But I think it just, the whole story feels a little bit weird to me when we move on to Ultron, because it's like, I thought you dealt with this, but now you're still dealing with your insecurities and your terror of trying to protect Earth, you know, your fear, your anxiety, and you accidentally created the Terminator, you know. It kind of just feels like, well, I thought you dealt with that in Iron Man 3 and you came to your resolution and you know, and you got your shrapnel out of your heart and all of that, but you're here, you're doing it again. So it just kind of, it feels a little bit disjointed to me, but not terribly, but like a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that was something I was going to forget to bring up. Like, so the whole climax of this film, because like you said, and I do agree with you, like he doesn't feel like it's enough. That's why he's got like Mark 42, and she thinks he's only made 15 suits, and and we see all the suits, but like he destroys all the suits, right? And he goes on to New York and everything. But then we go to Age of Ultron, and he's got suits. He's got the Hulkbuster, and he continues all the way through Infinity War and Endgame to have suits. So, like, you're right, where it's like, oh, he doesn't need the suit to be the hero, but here he falls back immediately into it. And I mean, I think that was a problem within the story writing. Like, they thought they came up with this really clever journey for him, and then realized, well, we can't do Iron Man in these other films if he doesn't have suits. So I think that that's ultimately where it does feel a little disingenuous, a little disjointed. And again, like it doesn't flow exactly from Avengers, because like he's telling Bruce, this doesn't define me. The arc reactor doesn't define me. It's just a part of me. It's who I am. And then immediately by the end of this film, gets it removed. Like, if Loki invaded Earth 6 months later after he gets the arc reactor, we're screwed, right? Like, there's a what if episode for you.
Well, that wouldn't have set off his anxiety. It would have to have been something else to set it off.
Well, I mean, and I'm sure there would have been something, but yeah, it just it's this kind of like, what do we do post Avengers? Now, I feel like they've kind of post Phase 2, post Age of Ultron, I feel like they've gotten better on how they wanted to plan these out. Because, like, at least in Phase 1, they're like, okay, we need the introductory movies, and we need a crisis for them to come together.
Right.
But Phase 2, they're like,
what do we do?
yeah, so how do we tell these individual stories without expecting Captain America to be flying in, or, you know, Thor to come in, or Hulk to come in?
Yeah, and you know, sorry to cut you off, but that is like one of the most annoying things to me. Not that they're not there, but everybody on the internet going, "Where's Thor? Where did he show up? Blah, 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 blah. Where's this person?" And I'm like, could you just not? Like, that's not what this movie is. Could you like maybe sit down?
Have they ever read a comic book? Because like there are situations there where you're like, okay, Superman's fighting this really dangerous villain. Like, why is Batman not there to help him out? Like, why is Wonder Woman not there?
Like,
you do have to have these isolated stories, like, and they have managed to figure out to do certain story. Like, look, Thor Ragnarok. You know, when we get to Thor Ragnarok and we have Hulk and Thor in the same movie, they learned how to manage to create certain scenarios for these characters to show up, and especially with, again, the Disney Plus shows being, I think, the next best thing for and hopefully eventually at some point, probably the future of the MCU, to tell more complex, more in-depth stories. Because I think had maybe Iron Man 3 been broken out into a 6-episode season, you could develop better that anxiety, that PTSD. You could develop even the fake Mandarin a little bit more. You could develop Aldrich a little bit more, because we only get glimpses of Aldrich through video footage and taking at different points and showing his evolution from, a physically handicapped person to Guy Pearce, and we don't get to go on that journey with him. We don't get to go through the journey of the soldiers that they tested on. Like, so when you have the one soldier who can't regulate and blows up at the Chinese theater, like, we don't know what he's going through. We get a little glimpse of that with Brant, because like we see, she had lost her arm in an IED explosion. That's why she's got the scars and everything. And so like we can understand why she would have volunteered. And so like a lot of the small, finer details that I think would have improved the story and would have made it more impactful are overshadowed because, okay, we're telling this in a 2-hour and 20-minute story time, and like, and this is one thing I'm a little bit afraid, especially because like seeing with what Eternals runtime is, with what Shang-Chi's runtime was, with what Spider-Man No Way Home's runtime is allegedly supposed to be, we're getting to about 3-hour films now. And that's not sustainable. I can understand it for Eternals because you're introducing 6 brand new characters. So like you've got to give ample time for those characters that each have their moments and have their character development, which is probably what the film suffers from. I mean, I haven't really been paying too much on reviews on that, but that's what my thinking is why people are not as like happy with that film, is it's suffering from its own weight of trying to handle too much. And then you like, if you could break Iron Man out, or even if you broke Eternals out into a 6-episode show on Disney Plus with the same level of detail and storytelling, I think you might have a better shot at developing out those characters and those storylines a little bit more. So I'm just going to be a big proponent of saying, hey, move these to television, move these to longer format storytelling, much like you said about Dune. Like, Dune could be more accessible as a television show versus an actual film, or even a trilogy of film. And Lord of the Rings, to an extent, could have benefited more, even though it's pretty much perfection. Like, still don't have Tom Bombadil, but pretty much perfection with what Peter Jackson did.
But if the second they put him in, everybody, why didn't they just leave him with the ring? Blah 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 blah. It's like, Gandalf didn't trust to leave him with the ring. He's a little absent-minded.
Well, not only that, even like Tom's like, no, you don't want to leave that thing with me. So it's like, there's internal logic, but again, like you're telling, it fits even within the comic book format, right? Like, because comic book format, you're telling long form stories through issues, roughly between 6 to 12 issues for one story arc. That maybe this is the way forward, because I think at some point, and we might be seeing it now with some of the Phase 4 films, not necessarily the shows, that they're buckling a little bit under the weight of trying to up the ante, but also trying to tell stories that are going to move the rest of the universe forward. So I think I mean, it's pure speculation at this point. I mean, not saying like I'm not excited for the future films coming out, but I do think that if they start feeling like they're running into a corner, or that they're like, well, we got to cram all this, because again, going back to the central complaint of Iron Man 3 is it's a lot of stuff that they're cramming in at once, and just like, okay, PTSD, Iron Patriot, Mandarin, Aldrich, Extremis, you're like, okay, can I was going to say Gwen, but Pepper and Tony's relationship, like you're juggling a lot of things, and you're trying to keep it within a decent runtime. I mean, even at this point, still going over 2 hours, and it suffers a little bit. But I will say, like, if I'm rating the Iron Man films, I'll go Iron Man 1, Iron Man 3, Iron Man 2 any day, and I will fight anyone, including you, because I know you that's not your ranking about it, So
Well, the thing is I had not gone back to like actually sit and just watch Iron Man 3 like since I saw it in theaters.
Okay.
Because I was like, I have zero need,
well, and like we've
to
said,
watch
it doesn't really move anything
Yeah, it doesn't
forward.
do any. That is one of the things, like, when we get to Thor Dark World, I literally only own the copy of that because it has an Infinity Stone. Like, that moves, that's related to the plot, of the universe. If it did not have any other touch points, I might, and I mean it's like maybe a Tic Tac sized of might, keep it for just purely for Tom Hiddleston and Loki's performance. Other than that, there's like absolutely nothing.
So we're telegraphing a little bit of our Thor Dark World review.
Well, I think it's just kind of an issue of these few movies here, like you said, of like what do we do right after Avengers. Right. And they don't really develop anything very well, and they just kind of are like, here, maybe? It's like their awkward puberty stage or something.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's like they don't really know what to do, but no, having seen Shang-Chi now, and then us doing this review, I went back and watched it, and I was like, that was not nearly as terrible as I remember it being. So, I just remember coming out of the theater being like, why did I waste my time with this?
Right.
And now I'm like, well, that wasn't that bad. I mean, I did get up and do a couple things, not like too much,
right.
But it wasn't like, I'm like, well, that wasn't so bad. I don't know, because Iron Man 2 does introduce us to Widow. I think Justin Hammer, what's his name?
Sam Rockwell.
Sam Rockwell is very funny.
Yes.
In that performance. I like it. Plot-wise, this is probably inches it out. Just because of the whole Whiplash thing and just thinking about what happens in the plot-wise there. But I don't think it inches it out by that much.
Oh yeah, I won't say like it's like a clear winner. I mean, outside
right.
of Iron Man 1 being the clear winner of
yeah.
the whole thing. It's one of the things, but you bring up a really interesting point that I was just thinking about as you were saying about it. So like Iron Man 3 is trying to deal with the aftermath of Avengers. Thor is trying to introduce an Infinity Stone. So it's trying to move the story forward a little bit.
Yeah.
But if we look at Winter Soldier, and I think the reason why Winter Soldier is probably the glowing child of Phase 2 is it really wasn't focused on post Avengers. It was focused on Steve, and it was focused on Bucky and their relationship and this and it just was trying to be a political thriller. And I think that's why it worked so well, because we get introduced to new characters who become lasting characters. It runs into an existing plot line that runs down into Civil War and even feeds into Infinity War and Endgame. And I think that maybe that's what they need to look at. And I think that's probably kind of what they've done since. That's kind of what it feels like with Guardians, with Ant-Man, all of the new films that kind of come out of it, even Doctor Strange, like they're not so concerned about exactly what happened in Avengers or the fact that the Avengers are around, but just that they are living in the world that the Avengers are in. And so I think that was the lesson they learned.
Yeah, because even in Shang-Chi, we talked about, you see the posters up on the walls, post-anxiety or post-blip anxiety and stuff like that. Like, they just, because you don't need to do much to be like, it's happened in the world, and now, here's how people are dealing with it.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, we had Falcon and Winter Soldier for that, basically. So, dealing with that whole post-blip kind of re-immersion and reintegration into the world. But yeah, it didn't. Yeah. Shang-Chi wasn't relying on you knowing anything with Doctor Strange or anything with Cap or Thor. It was just like, okay, here's the world they live in. We know these characters exist. And okay, we'll throw Trevor in there. That's the nice bridge between this film and that film. And still acknowledging that the world is happening. We get Blonsky back for Abomination. We get Wong for a little bit. So we get these little tidbits that tie in, but they're like, if you blink and you miss it, you're not missing anything from the film.
Right.
Whereas I think that they were more concerned in Phase 2 of how can we keep these so connected that like you kind of have to watch these to understand what's going to go on in Age of Ultron and Infinity War and Endgame, whereas then they kind of were like, okay, we'll have things be an impact, but like we'll still let these characters have their own stories. I mean, even with Scott and Ant-Man and Wasp being like post-Civil War, ankle bracelet, funny adventure, but like that's it, you know, that's all. It doesn't focus too much on Civil War or anything like that. So yeah, this is the awkward teenage phase for the MCU, I think, with Phase 2. There are shining moments, like we said, Captain America Winter Soldier being probably the most shiny moment, and then, you know, Age of Ultron kind of capping it out. Although Ant-Man is the end stone, I think, for Phase 2, if I remember correctly. So, but yeah, you have your shining moments, you have your duds, but ultimately we're still kind of going strong. They're still learning, like, at this point. And I think once we get to Phase 3, that's where they've like, okay, we've got a solid plan.
Figured it out.
We know how to introduce these characters. And I think it's only going to get better with Phase 4 with the shows, because I'm really excited for we talked a little bit about this before recording, and I know you haven't seen anything with it, but like just seeing some of the images that they're releasing for Disney Plus Day, showing kind of like little teases of Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel and She-Hulk, like it's amping me up for these individual stories that we're going to see on the smaller screen. I mean,
and then we have Hawkeye coming up pretty soon.
Very, very excited for Hawkeye. So, all right, well, nothing else to really much talk about this film. You know,
well, one thing I thought of, it's a totally random comment, not like super important, but when I was rewatching and he's blowing up all his suits, I was just thinking about Spider-Man and Vulture, and like, would that not be the prime spot? You've blown up all your technology right here, just like dive down and get all these bits and pieces of all his suits and get all this technology. But that was just like a random.
Who knows? Maybe they did. Maybe they did. I mean, they retconned Peter, you know, into Iron Man 2. So who knows? Who knows? And especially like with Morbius coming out in January, and it's confusing everyone on what universe it's taking place in, because you do have Michael Keaton showing up, and but yet you have references to Toby's Spider-Man, to Andrew's Spider-Man, to Tom's Spider-Man, and no one knows. No one knows where this place is taking.
And that's fine.
Especially with, you know, No Way Home probably is going to answer some of those questions for us, hopefully. That's the one. Like, that is the one where I'm like,
for that one.
Die Hard. I need it now. I want to see it now. But we got a little bit of a ways to get there before that happens. I might actually, even though I told our manager that I was not going to take any days in December, I might have to take that Friday.
Shamey.
Well, to be fair, it is before Christmas, and I told her I was not taking anything near Christmas off. So we shall see. So if we're going to score it, let's see. If I'm going to score this one, I can't remember what I gave Iron Man 2. It's been a while.
We need to keep a spreadsheet.
We do. You can be responsible for all spreadsheets, because I will not upkeep them at all, and I will forget about them. I think I'm going to land on a 3.5. Like, that might seem very generous with some of the criticisms like I have of it. But ultimately, you know, the one thing that has always sold the Iron Man franchise and the Marvel films in general have been Robert Downey Jr. And I think the story could have been complete crap, and it could have just been, it could have been as bad as Captain Marvel, in my opinion. And I could have probably still enjoyed it more because of Robert Downey Jr.
His performance.
I think he just saves it, and also even why am I blanking out on his name? Jon Favreau. I don't know. I have no idea why I was blanking out his name. But Jon Favreau is happy, you know, is also another selling point in this film. Just their little bickering back and forth about trying to turn the camera, you know, so he can see who Pepper is talking to.
Of security.
You know, and that relationship is always really great. And so I think the rest of the movie could have been complete crap, and I still would have enjoyed it more than some of the lesser Marvel films. And then quite frankly, like even the lesser Marvel films are still films I can enjoy on some form and aspect. Even Captain Marvel. But you know, that's going to be a really interesting review. I'm really interested to see when we get to Captain Marvel how we're going to talk about that film, because I've talked about it twice on the podcast solo, so I have no idea what it's going to be like as a conversation with you on here. And maybe I can get Pat to join on that one too, since he likes to be a little bit lazy. So what score do you give it?
I was thinking about it, and I was kind of hemming and hawing, but I think 3.5 just kind of feels right, especially because I can't remember what I gave Iron Man 2.
See, it's really like, because especially when we say, oh, it edges out over Iron Man 2, we don't want to give it a lower score.
Right. I feel like just plot point wise and the story that they had here edges out Iron Man 2 just a little bit, but it's not by that much.
Right.
I feel like the 3 Iron Man movies like were sort of a like love story to Robert Downey Jr. for getting this all kicked off and started, and giving us the MCU, you know, and getting it going. And then it was kind of like, well, we got to get him another couple of movies. We're going to have him in stuff. You know, it was just sort of like a love story to hear Robert, you know, take this and run. And
right.
I mean, I think he's done a really good job with it, you know. And especially when it comes up to, I mean, of course, when we get to Endgame, and will be big spoilers for Endgame if you haven't watched it.
Who hasn't watched Endgame?
Well, who knows, man? But
are they living under a rock?
They might be. But, you know, to have him be the one to make the ultimate sacrifice and just cap it all out was just perfect. So, you know, 3.5 feels right for his pretty much last solo film here.
Yeah, and you know, when you say that, like, I think prior to Endgame coming out and like trying to figure out who's going to make the ultimate sacrifice, right? Like, was it going to be Cap? Was it going to be Thor? Was it going to be Iron Man? And I know I was Team Cap and you were Team Iron Man.
Well, because in my opinion, it had to be one or the other. It had to be Iron Man or it had to be Cap. It could not be any, like, literally. If both of them had survived, I kind of would have been upset.
Right. And
I knew it had to be one of those two.
But like I was thinking Cap for specific reasons, and you were thinking Iron Man for specific reasons. But then like when we started kind of this MCU franchise review, I think I talked to you about it. I might not have. But once we started it and kind of like going back and reflecting on everything and knowing where everything goes, it's like it is right. It is right that it's Tony.
How could it have been anyone else?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, for him to start this monster of a cinematic universe and come to this ultimate climax, like even if it had been Cap, like it would have been okay, but it makes it so much better that it's Tony when you get down to the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it. You don't have anything else to say, do you?
No.
All right.
Nope.
So I hope you enjoyed this one. I know we were kind of scattershot with it, but that kind of happens with the MCU ones where, you know, especially these are the older ones because, you know, they've been around for a while. Everyone's talked about them. So if you're not familiar with them, like I said, you're living under a rock. But all right. If as always, like, comment, you know, subscribe to the podcast, share it out with your friends if you like our kind of takes on things. I'm going to celebrate this, even though it's a very small number for most YouTubers. I think as us being a small channel right now, our Dune review is 30 views, and cool. I like it. You know, it's like that's such a small number when you look at like some of these channels that have like Critical Drinker.
Millions of views.
Critical Drinker did his Eternals review, and like it had been out for an hour, and it had like 800,000 views, and I'm like,
jeez.
How? But you know, I'll celebrate the little numbers if I can, and you know, the streaming we've been learning about that, and I'm having fun doing that. One of the goals for the podcast is to eventually possibly have once a week a live show. more specifically centered around films that just get released like on that Friday or Saturday, where that we can get a chance to get out and see it, and everyone that wants to be on the panel can kind of come together and talk about it a little bit if our schedules can allow it. So that's going to happen possibly at some point. We'll see how that goes. But, as always, you can write into the podcast if you don't want to comment at criticsnotcynics@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. And if you're listening audio only, you can basically get us on any of the podcasting services that are out there. So, all right, guys, we'll talk to you next time.